So thanks, everyone. I'd like to begin this breakfast, a breakfast celebrating women leaders, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're on today. As we gathered and we saw faces arriving, we noticed that there were faces from all over Australia. Thank you for coming. I'd like to acknowledge that we share this land today. I'd also like to acknowledge our sorrow for the cost of that sharing, past and present sorrows. And I'd like to acknowledge our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. We also pause at this moment, recognizing that we are all held in love and given human dignity as creatures of life, as children of God. Joseph has muted everyone. Thanks, Joe. At certain times, we will ask you to unmute, but really we go through a process, which Christine, I'll hand over to Christine and you can explain. Thanks, Christine.
Great, Cindy, and a very warm welcome to all the people on all these different screens at 8 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne and earlier still when you go west. I'm the ACRAF Executive Officer, and we're a small counter-human trafficking NGO. Our main work is supporting victims of human trafficking and modern slavery, advocating for systems change and raising awareness. And if you want to know more about who we are, our web URL is on the chat, and that will lead you into an area you can click around, find a bit more about us. You might want to get our newsletter, and you can, or you can explore membership. So you could do that on our website. Thanks, Joe. Or you can do it by emailing Joseph at office@acraf.org.au. So you're very welcome to engage with us even more than just the breakfast webinar this morning. Our outline, we've got 45 minutes together this morning. We're going to hear from our two speakers. We're going to spend about 10 minutes in a breakout room of about 4 people each. And we will then come back and just share a little bit in the chat and possibly also verbally about what we've heard and what that's calling us to. I was really excited when our ACRAF team said, yes, let's do this breakfast. And it was particularly after that Wednesday vote at the Plenary Council. I think ACRAF decided, well, we're not going to just sit around and wait to be acknowledged as women leaders. We are, in Australia, in the 21st century, already women leaders. So there's no need to be hanging around waiting to be told that. And we in ACRAF know that we are providing leadership, sometimes by listening, sometimes by taking action, on such a compelling social justice issue that impacts on so many women across this planet of ours. So we're going to continue to be active protagonists, and this is like a first step after the Plenary Council for us. So I'm going to kick off by inviting first Claire and then Elizabeth to speak. Claire Condon, probably known to most people on this screen, is a Good Samaritan sister. Claire gave ACRAF 13 years ago the most wonderful support to help ACRAF to get moving when Claire was the president of Catholic Religious Australia. And then after leadership, Claire joined ACRAF and she's now our president. So it's great that you've done this, Claire. And Claire, just before you start, Claire was asked to write a piece for the Plenary Council as a parenti, and with a particular focus on women. It's a great piece, very short, easy to read, but really encouraging of us as women. And it was published in Crux. Is that how you say it, Claire? Crux or Crooks?
Oh, true. Yes.
And we're going to share it. There you go. So Claire, what happened for women at the Plenary Council?
But thanks a lot, Christine. As Christine said, I wasn't a member of the Plenary Council. I was one of 18 advisors, which included 5 women. As advisors at the Second Assembly, we were positioned in a classroom on another floor and observed the proceedings as they were live streamed. We had the opportunity to mix with members at morning and afternoon teas and lunch and the evenings. So in one sense, unfortunately, I don't believe that the experience, theological and scriptural expertise that was in that room was adequately utilised and explored throughout the whole of the Plenary Council. I think if that had been the case, there might have been a clearer definition of some of the theology and understanding of church that emerged, rather than perhaps opinions that varied greatly. During the week, we were asked to present 6 5-minute addresses at the beginning of each of 6 of the 8 themes. And the lot fell on me to present on witnessing to the equal dignity of women and men. Moira Hanlon and Sandy Cornish presented on synodality and integral ecology. Let me say that this was not the only area for women to contribute. Women had constituted about 1/3 of the members and were prominent in all areas of discernment and decision-making. But this session brought the issue of women and leadership to a head. A 2/3 majority from the bishops' deliberative vote was not achieved for the proposals as they were presented, and the media capitalised on the negative voting from some of the bishops. There was an immediate disruption to the smooth progression of a super planned process. Simply unable to accept the response of some bishops, many women, a few bishops, priests and laymen, decided quite spontaneously and without any rancour not to return to their tables and to indicate this is totally unacceptable and procedures cannot progress until there is dialogue, discernment and a clear change of direction. To me, it seemed incredulous that after 4 years of consultation, where the place of women in leadership in the church had emerged as a key issue of concern, that this rejection could emerge in such a way, and that the bishops did not have to explain themselves in any transparent or accountable manner. So for some women there, they were left with the question, has anything changed? Is anything likely to change in the future? Was this a case of a culture of prejudice against women, or just fear of losing power by some? Or as one bishop has put it recently, confusion about a voting process. So what does it all mean? There have been a variety of interpretations, and particularly in the media, there are many male interpretations. At this stage, I'm not sure I know what it means. Because women do hold many leadership positions in the Australian Catholic Church, in education, health, social services, diocesan offices, parish pastoral councils and advisors where they exist. They're retreat givers, spiritual directors, lecturers in theological colleges, universities and seminaries, religious orders, and here at Acrath, founded by women. So you might ask, what's the issue? Women are disproportionately excluded from senior governance positions within the church at key diocesan and parish levels. Authority and power, and note that they're 2 different things, are totally vested in bishops and priests in a clerical system. As Pope Francis said recently, governance power can be too closely linked to sacramental power. So from the Plenary Council decrees, what, if anything, has changed for women? I think there's great potential, but so far they're only aspirational indicators. And let me just quote from some of the decrees for that section. There's a recognition of the scriptural equality of women and men, in theory. There is acknowledgement of the harm done to women over many years. So how is that harm to be addressed? In apologies, in compensation, in redressing abuse and exclusion from ministry? Certainly there's a growing awareness in society about the equal dignity of women and men. Nonetheless, disregard for such equality still exists in society and in the church. The document says there's much to do, but what is to be done has not been identified. Some women experience barriers and a lack of support in seeking to offer their gifts of service in the church. So how is this to be addressed? There's a need to address issues of power, authority, and freedom of persons to decide and act on their decision with informed conscience, an exact quote. So to the women who hold to this freedom in regard to their own lives and the lives of their family, if you haven't done so, do so. The Plenary Council committed the Church in Australia to acting in ways that witness clearly to the dignity of women and men. So let us keep the institutional church to account. It committed enhancing the role of women in the church and to overcome assumptions of culture, practices, and language that lead to inequality. I'd suggest that inclusive language in liturgy and all church documents might be the place to start. It decreed that women be appropriately represented in decision-making structures of church governance at all levels. And I say to women, keep asking your bishop what's happening in this area. It committed to properly remunerate women who lead and serve the church in various ways. I'd say, women, check your pay slip with your fellow male workers. Finally, that should the universal law of the church be modified to authorise the diaconate for women, the Plenary Council recommends that the Australian bishops examine how best to implement it in the context of the church in Australia. Let's keep a running brief. I agreed to speak this morning because the Plenary Council is really only the beginning, not the end. These changes need to be embedded into the structures of the church. But in the meantime, we women take hold of all the leadership we already exercise in implementing the gospel imperatives for our time and our place. And we don't need any authorising to do so. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Claire. We women, no need for authorising. I love that. Elizabeth Young, Mercy sister. 9 years ago, Elizabeth leapt into ACRAF counter-trafficking work in regional South Australia. And now, Elizabeth, can we say you're in Outback, New South Wales? There's Forbes Outback.
Not quite.
Elizabeth has agreed to speak. Elizabeth, after the Plenary Council was actually approached by the ABC and The Age journalists asking for a piece, and we'll share a wonderful opinion piece Elizabeth wrote in our chat. And also the piece that Elizabeth wrote resulted in the most exciting blog. I just couldn't believe I kept reading and reading all these responses as people felt very fired up about the issue. Elizabeth, when you were asked to speak publicly and you chose to do that, and I think we're really grateful that you've agreed to share this morning, and I think you've prepared something about women in leadership for us. So over to you, Elizabeth, there in Forbes.
Thank you, Christine. And I'd firstly also like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people on whose land I'm present today and the sacred land on which we all gather. Several years ago, while living in Melbourne, I started to attend a poetry slam competition called Slam-A-Lam Ding Dong. I watched as poets broke out of their shells to share stories of their own experiences of suffering or discrimination or perplexity. And I asked myself, well, what would I have to tell? And then I realized that I did have a topic. And this became my first and my best slam poem. I would just like to share the first part of it. This is for the she one who was mourned at her birth, kicked as soon as she could crawl, and sold off to servitude in the bowels of civilization. This is for the she one taken at 6 years old, her dreams to be a film star turned to nightmares of cheap porn, prostitution her only education. This is for the she one who was raped and honour killed for her crime, or worse than death, forced to marry her penetrator. And this is for the he one, told to man up, told that men don't cry, told to be a man, not be yourself, restrained from facing his vulnerabilities until the shackles became suicide. I know. I told my brother after my father died, you're the man of the house now, though he was man enough to cry more than I. I regret my words, but I have pockmarked this uneven playing field too, where gender, that many splendid thing, sets our course and races us in the entirely wrong event for our capacities, or dare I say it, our desires. And how could I possibly complain? Grown up in rich, white privilege, healthy, safe, financially secure, yet your liberation is bound up in mine. And once we share our secret hopes and dreams, we are united on a deep rope team, and your injustice pierces mine too. And then I went on to talk about feeling called to ordain ministry in the Catholic Church, and that being bound up with the causes of equal dignity for all. Just what Christine was mentioning before about women and diaconates, that was where it was heading. In the years since I've been part of ACRAF, I've been increasingly confronted by my own life of privilege, and then responsibility to speak up for and with others. I don't want to unethically appropriate their pain, but I don't want to turn away. I will never forget when early on we were encouraged to read The Road of Lost Innocence by Somali Man. She was abandoned as a baby in Cambodia and sold, abused, raped, and married, all before she was 16 years old. The amazing thing was that she escaped that life and later founded an organisation to combat trafficking in women and children for sexual slavery. Those stories both upset us at the enormity of the problems, but also give us hope in the strength of the survivor. ACRAF keeps us real in educating us about exploited people in our country and around the world. We recognise the suffering of all, but it's no surprise that females make up the greatest number of victims. How can we turn this tide? Well, I would also like to acknowledge the wonderful leadership of ACRAF that I've seen in action. It's been so effective with few numbers and minimal paid staff in partnering, resourcing, supporting victims and advocacy. The impact of sisters, brothers, religious priests and lay leaders goes far beyond their numbers. The persistence, passion and faith of ACRAF members continues to impress me as they change people's lives for the better and educate the free. I think of the well-known image of a mother bear defending her cubs. They don't give up. So that is why I value a leadership that is diverse and that welcomes women. For a long time, I did not want to get involved in advocacy for women in the church. I felt that I hadn't suffered. I don't come from a place of pain or anger. And I've actually been blessed to be given theological education and the kinds of roles that I dreamed of. But eventually I realized that it's not about me anymore. It is about those who we could serve better, who hunger for liturgy and sacrament to support their lives spiritually and pastorally. It is about young people who hope that their gifts and callings might be recognized in a healthy, diverse religious leadership. And it is about our ability to speak up as a church for those who are vulnerable and exploited. This just came out. The Bishop's social justice statement for this year, respect, confronting violence and abuse. And it specifically names women and children as the most at risk. But will a document about listening to women be listened to when it comes from a group that women are excluded from? However, despite everything, even in Australia, the church and religious leaders can still be a voice of moral leadership. We are the most connected organisation at the grassroots, with reach into every tiny parish, Catholic school, social service and other agency. We have so much potential to do good. It was why I wanted to commit my life in a public ceremony of vows, rather than have a private relationship between God and I. Yet the world and your average Catholic sees the church's spokespeople as the ordained. Those who are recognised in a public way can use their influence for those who have been silenced. They also have witness value in being able to preach during that special space of the liturgy. How much more could this be enhanced by bringing gender diversity into the visible leadership structure and models that are inclusive, discerning, prayerful, collaborative, empowering and transformative? This is where I see the Plenary Council bringing hope, not so much in the documents, but in the process itself, where a spirit of listening and equality pervaded the room. I watched from my computer at home, but I saw members from across the board with roles such as welcome or acknowledgement of country, morning prayers, facilitators and document writers, depending on their abilities. Last year, I was also a fly on the wall as a technical support person in the small Plenary Council groups online. And I saw for myself how respectful the members were, how eager to listen to the results of their prayers. This is something to build on. And perhaps next time, there might even be female acolytes at the masses for a start. What I hope is that in future, all kinds of callings are valued and encouraged. What we can learn from ACRAF is how we might not repeat or create new styles of authoritarian or abusive structures of power over others, but aim to look more like the kingdom of God, where all are members of God's family and can witness to the good news of Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Your poem is, your performance piece is going to really stay in my head for a long time. Thank you so much for sharing that and all the other thoughts that you shared with us. We're going to all go into breakout rooms now to just ponder a little bit what we've heard. We're going to be in rooms of about 4 people each. We'll have 10 minutes to introduce ourselves to each other in that room, and then to think about what Claire and Elizabeth have shared with us this morning. What did we hear? What does this call us to? What did we hear? What does this call us to? When we get the wind up from the breakout rooms, we'll all come back together and we'll ask each group to share one thought in the chat. So quickly find somebody who's willing to do it, and then as soon as they come back in, just type it into the chat. Okay, so what did you hear? What is it calling you to? Off we go.